So first off, Josh, being a FIBA commentator, international basketball commentator, and you commentate on like the SLB now, used to be like BBL, and you commentate on the B League, right? Like the Japan's league. Is that Japan's like top professional league? Is
Yeah.
that well? How would you describe that kind of journey that you've had in commentary and maybe just your overall basketball journey in your life?
I'll always shoot you a very honest answer. Nepotism. So that's
Oh,
the
okay. Yep, you're dead.
that's the blunt way of putting it. But there's obviously context to it. So
Mm.
my father, I'm the son of Bett, one of the greatest professional coaches in this country. He was a
Mm.
former player at Crystal Palace and had a very outstanding but short coaching career in the former BBL. Obviously, had to retire because he had 3 kids. And his best friend and former teammate at Crystal Palace, a man by the name of Paul Stimpson, was director of FIBA Media. Worked in television throughout Europe, broadcasting basketball. So I'd say about around 2004, when I was 14, my dad started to get work as a freelancer in the summers because he was also a math teacher at an American international school, which I went to. He was commentating the 2004 Olympics, and then
Mm.
he was doing commentary for FIBA and then EuroLeague until 2016, until him and my mother moved to Canada. And during that time, I'd say when I stopped playing, another straight answer. I mean, the stats don't lie. You can look up my stats; they're terrible. When I played for the junior national team in my NCAA Division III stats, I mean, I was never destined to be a professional basketball player. That's just the truth of it. But I mean, I love this game so much. I've loved it from when I was a kid. So when I came back to the UK for university, I was en route to be a physical education teacher, but partly because I wanted to coach basketball. And
Mm.
another thing I just wanted to do, I wanted to somehow get in the media side of basketball. I never had my thoughts on being a commentator because I loved when you're into coaching, you're used to like editing game film and learning about the game from a tactical standpoint. And I'd always ask my dad at FIBA or is there anything at EuroLeague where I could come in behind the scenes and work with content. So there was opportunities that I never took upon. But then what happened, as I mentioned, 2016, he moved to Canada. And being so obsessed, really obsessed with the international game, especially European basketball, because that's, I'm based in London. We're just on the edge of Europe and,
Mm.
everything's close. The FIBA created the Basketball Champions League. And the Basketball Champions League is their premium competition that works alongside the new window system. So whether it's a FIBA Basketball World Cup or a Continental Cup like the Eurobasket Asia Cup, you have windows. So there was opportunity to do some commentary. And I got an email from Paul Stimpson, said, would you like to come and do a game? Just one game. And for me, it was like, wow. So I did the game and I did it probably very terribly. It's weird when you watch basketball as a fan and then you try to go into it as a commentator. You're going from being a fan to then being someone who's doing something professionally. And I wasn't great. I wasn't getting much work, but I wanted to learn because I was so hungry to get to be successful at this. Because when you love something and you're a part of it at a professional level, there's no better feeling in the world. So I was given more opportunities to get better. I was given games in the FIBA Europe Cup, but where my opportunity I felt really I excelled at was at the same time the studio that the games were being commentated at was in a place called Felton. It's just in West London by Heathrow, not too far from where I was living. There was the FIBA Liga de las Americas, which today is known as the Basketball Champions League Americas. And those games would happen usually Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 3 days of 2 games each. And they would be done sometimes at midnight. You'd finish sometimes maybe at 6 a.m. in the morning. And, it's not desirable for people in the UK or the commentators at the time to stay up that late because a lot of them have busy schedules. So I jumped on that opportunity as quick as possible. And I did that for about a year and a half. I started to get more Basketball Champions League games in Europe. And I wouldn't say I was getting better. It took a long, long time. But what I was showing was a, just a hunger. I can never look back and say, oh, I was getting better. I was getting great. It was just, listen, I was persistent. This is what I wanted to do. If there was any opportunity, I would do it, And what I found is by watching basketball in my free time, by having all this opportunity, you're learning more and more about the game. But more importantly is I always have the saying that you have to surround yourself with great people. And I had the best people around me. Jeff Taylor, the international voice of basketball. he is the man who his commentary in 2006 when Greece beat the USA at the World Cup is what inspired me to love international basketball. I mean, I held this guy in such high regard watching his games over the years, and now all of a sudden he's a colleague of mine. And not only that, he becomes a friend, and I'm learning from him. So, and even still to this day, like he is, in my mind, the number one best international basketball commentator on the planet. So since then, I've been learning from him. As the journey progressed, I'd say it was about in 2022, I decided to step away from teaching. I was a full-time PE teacher and relied more or less on my freelance basketball commentary. It may be a case where I probably will go back into teaching, but at the end of the day, it's for what it is now. I'm just a freelance basketball commentator.
Freelance? You mean like there isn't like an actual media network or organization you're like contracted to? You just go with temporary contracts or something? Is that how it works?
Essentially, it's not a contracted place. I mean, I do most of my work with FIBA, so I do mostly with Basketball Champions League, and FIBA's been very good to me. You know, they've provided me with a lot of work over the years, and I'm very grateful for that, and I'll always be loyal to that. I 110% support everything FIBA does in terms of expanding the international game, because I think what FIBA doesn't get enough credit for is the purpose. The goal is to spread basketball, to make it develop. Basketball shouldn't just be for the elite, right? It shouldn't just be for the countries that have, you know, the best clubs or the biggest fans. You know, if we're talking about basketball in a country where maybe on an international mainstream media it's not known as, that for me is still exciting. If you look at the FIBA Asia Cup, right, I think it's the perfect example. This was a competition that started in the 60s, I believe, which went back and forth being won by the Philippines, Japan, and Korea. And then I'd say about mid-70s, after the Philippines won the last in 1985. For about the 70s right up until the 90s, it just became a total dominance of the Chinese national team. And then you go to about 2007, Iran wins for the first time. They win 3 after that. Now China wins, I think, either 1 or 2 or 3 more. But you look now, Australia's in the mix. The FIBA Asia Cup, in my mind, is becoming so popular because it's becoming so competitive. And that's down to the work of what FIBA's done, having these windows, giving federations a chance to put national teams together for both the men and the women, and also, you know, creating more of a fan base. So I really love the fact that basketball's gone global. You know, it's always been global, and you can attain that down to the Dream Team in 1992. But what FIBA's done is given every country across the world a platform to really showcase what they have, and I think that's really special.
Yeah, that does sound like really good stuff they're doing with the international game there. And so another one with being a commentator, what would you say is like the things you really always have to practice and work on to be like good at the job?
This is an interesting question because a lot of people ask me that. And is it a case of catchphrases? Is it a case of, you know, excitement? I mean, I always say, like, we're all different. You know, you have to be organic in what you do. You can try other things that other people do and, you know, try to implement it in with how you deliver a game, and that's fine. But I'd always say that the only thing I would suggest is to really know the facts. Go into games knowing more than stats, stories. You know, for example, I can't remember when I was in the 2000. No, I'll give you a more recent game. It was Great Britain versus Greece in the Eurobasket qualifiers.
The one like last year or a few months
ago?
No,
it was a month. It was a month ago actually. It was in because they played 2 games. The GB won the game at home in London, and then they lost on the road in Thessaloniki. But what's great is when Greece plays, you have all the old legends. So, for example, they had Lazarus Papadopoulos, Dimos Thikoudis. I think they also had, I don't know if they had Papaloukas, but these are all players that played in 2005 that won Greece the Eurobasket, then played in 2006 that defeated the USA that had a team of LeBron James, Carmelo Anthony, Chris Bosh. And for the viewers, if you see these faces and you don't know who they are, as a commentator, you're storytelling, you're giving context to who they are, why they're important. That's very valuable, that is. I think I remember it was Greece versus somebody maybe a year ago in a qualifying window, and it showed Vasilis Spanoulis. And I made the same reference because he was on that team that those other players are on. And I think I said something on the lines of like 18 years ago, that man was playing against LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony and Chris Bosh, and now he's the coach. I think FIBA clipped it on their socials on something like "Time flies," or you're getting old or something. And and that's important too, because you look how we consume content today. It's very different from when I was a teenager, where it's mainstream television. Now we consume content via our smartphones, via our laptops, and in the case of FIBA, you've got X, Instagram, Facebook, all the TikTok, but you also have Courtside 1891, which is their main digital platform that they stream their games on. So you can almost watch any basketball game on the planet these days.
Yeah, so I guess it's been a big growth as well for basketball in like countries all over the world with the internet and social media. I guess especially for the NBA, they're so big on social. I feel like they've become bigger on social media. It feels than TV sometimes. So, and also, what would you say? Do you have any? What would you say though, or would be like the hardest things or the biggest challenges about working as a commentator and a broadcaster, and like when you do a game, what's like the hardest thing, I guess?
There's always challenges. I mean, I'd say in my early days, sometimes you may end up having a game where there's not enough information on certain personnel on the floor.
Yeah.
The FIBA live stats it doesn't always happen. It's happened once in a blue moon where they don't always update. But generally, when I'd say probably commentating games with FIBA is the easiest, because the people that work behind the scenes do such a magnificent job of making sure live stats are up to date, that information about players is available. But in the case of when information is not available, then you have to, and this all comes about planning, right? So a lot of people like to do pages and pages of prep to go into a game. And I've worked with people that sometimes have 10 pages. And I was thinking in my mind, like, how are you going to go flip through the pages during the game? It's like studying for a test, Some people will read text, some people write notes, but if you can try to visualize what you're learning to when you commentate, you'll avoid lots of issues. A couple of times, like when you do games remotely, there are satellite issues, but as long as you've got a strong Wi-Fi connection at home, it's always available. I've never really walked into any issues before. I mean, a lot of people have always asked me in international basketball, do politics come into play? And I say never, because basketball's not about politics. There might be things in mainstream media that are said about certain places, but then again, basketball can give you a complete different story and a better image of what mainstream media delivers to you. So I've never ran into any of those issues at all. Like, for example, I would say, if you think, there's tough ones to say, because I've commentated almost, not all, but most countries that have competed in FIBA games. And the only thing I'd like to address is that those basketball teams have always represented their countries and nations with the utmost respect and sort of in the finest fashion, if you can say.
Yeah, I think like a lot of the players who play like in the international game, they're really passionate about playing for the country, and I think that's really cool to see. Well, I guess like looking a bit into the future, do you have like any specific future aspirations where to take your commentary career, or things you want to achieve?
That's another tough question. There's a lot of people say, is your next target the NBA? And I'd say I've never really thought about that, to be honest. And I wouldn't consider myself worthy enough to be at that level, because quite frankly, I'm very happy where I am. If for the rest of my life it was to wake up at 6 a.m. on a Saturday and Sunday to cover, Japanese league, then Turkish league, and to keep doing FIBA games plus Windows, that would be my legacy for the rest of my life. And I'd be very happy with that, because like I say, you're always grateful for the people that give you opportunities. And also I'd still say that the level I'm able, and I'm very privileged, of course, I'm not trying to say, I've earned the right to be who I am. I'm just very lucky. And it's a great level to be at. There's nothing better than going to covering the Basketball Champions League for a whole year, covering the B League as well as the Turkish League and other leagues, and then being able to go places in the summer and call these games live. It's a tremendous honor. And for as long as it lasts, so be it, basically. But now that I'm a father now, who knows, maybe my wife and I may move to Vietnam in the future. We don't know. Maybe we might move to the United States, where my parents are currently based. I may go back into education, but overall, to summarize all the waffling I've just said there, I'd say I'm just a fan of the game. So
Mm.
regardless whether I'm commentating tomorrow or again next year, that will still be what I do in my free time. I'll just be watching hoops.
Yeah, yeah, true. I did also like the other day I got to meet and speak with Clive Castillo, the
Mm.
yeah, so he's the assistant coach now at the London Lions.
Yep.
He did tell me you have a lot of like appreciation for Filipino basketball fans, and because like, I'm also like Filipino. I was born in Philippines, and then I moved to Australia when I was 8 years old. But and you got to commentate on the FIBA World Cup, right, in 2023, which is
Yep.
I guess 2 years ago now. It's kind of crazy to think of. Could you talk a bit about your time working during that World Cup and being able to go to Manila because a lot of the games were there, and just I guess your overall appreciation for the fans in that country and the game there?
Well, it's how long do we have? Because it's quite a long story, actually.
As long as you want, I'll go all day.
Okay, so appreciation for Philippine basketball goes back to, well, the first encounter with Philippine basketball comes when I was a teenager. You know, this country, the United Kingdom, like Australia, okay, where you've grown up, and obviously you were born in a magnificent country as well. This country is magnificent because, it's a country today that's, so diverse and that's built on foundations that people who've come to this country have offered so much. And I used to play, as a youth player, quite a high level of basketball. We're talking about the age of 16, not professional basketball, but in my free time. I live in a very small suburb just outside London. I used to go to the same sports center to play pickup basketball. And a lot of the people I would play pickup basketball were nurses that worked in our National Health Service, the NHS, who were from the Philippines. And that was the first time I'd met people from the Philippines, from, I think, maybe I was 14. And what amazed me was how much they knew about, the game, also the NBA. And, through that bond, you develop friendships, obviously. And then in the summer of 2013, I was working in Taipei. I was doing a summer internship as part of my teaching qualification process. My dad had flown out to Manila because he was commentating the 2013 FIBA Asia Cup. And he texts me. He says, "You've got to come to the Philippines. They are absolutely basketball mad out here." So it was always on my bucket list. But then he said, obviously, at that time, it wasn't Courtside 1891. It was live basketball.tv. And I think even when you watch a game, you don't really get an understanding of what an atmosphere is like unless you've already been to a top atmosphere. But whenever the Philippines would play, they were playing Chinese Taipei and they lost. And I just remember you could feel the emotion and energy from the crowd. So at that point, I got a feeling of what it was like. Now, going on to Clive, who's a very good friend of mine. Clive, I first met in 2014 or 15. He was a part of a local, no, I wouldn't say local, a national Filipino basketball league that's based in London called Campi. And this time, I was trained to be a teacher, but I still had that, as I mentioned to you before, like the urge to do content for basketball. So I contacted the people at Campi and said, "Listen, I'm trying to become a teacher, but I also want to become a basketball videographer. Can I come and volunteer for you guys? I just want to make some highlights because I'd like to put a profile together to put together the Center FIBA, EuroLeague for future jobs." And they welcomed me in with open arms. And there was a guy called Ray Rodriguez, Sonny Sanchez, who ran the program. And they're now friends for life for me. I saw a league where it was like, wow, it almost seems like there's more passion for this league than there is for the professional league, the British Basketball League. I was probably with them for about 2 months because then I started to go full-time into the work I was doing at the school. So that was my first introduction to Philippine basketball. Then when I started with FIBA, the first game I formally commentated with the Philippines was in 2021. It was the game during the lockout in Clark City, in the Clark City bubble. And the Philippines were playing against Korea, which I knew I was doing this game about 2 months before. So I spent the 2 months during lockdown just, going through the history of this matchup and learning that it was such a big rivalry. And I'd say probably the Philippines had a lot more of this rivalry than Korea. Because I remember specifically speaking to some Korean friends who were basketball journalists, and they'd always say, "Listen, we consider China more of our rivals historically, but we do respect the Philippines are a very good team because we've always had matchups with China. But anyway, that game went right down to the wire. The Philippines were up by 3. Ange Kwame missed a free throw. And I can't remember the guy's name. He played NCAA basketball. But went down the other end, hit a three-pointer, tied it up. And there was like 2 seconds left. And I think I said something like, we're going to OT. And then Tad Baldwin calls a timeout. Dwight Ramos, they advance the ball. Ramos inbounds it. And then SJ Bellinger gets it, steps through, and hits a shot off the bankboard. I think somewhere in the lines I said something like in Tagalog language, Salamat Bellinger, which obviously translates to thank you. Now, this time I was still teaching. I was teaching at an international school. I'd finished that game very early in the morning in the UK. I drove right to work, finished a whole day of teaching. And when you're teaching, you can't have your phone during the day. So my phone was in my desk. But one of my colleagues kept saying to me, you need to check your phone. I think there's an emergency. I said, what's wrong? It just keeps vibrating. Because at that time, my phone was getting notifications from Twitter, IG, Facebook, WhatsApp. And I looked over, there was like 1,000 notifications. Because basically that moment had gone so viral. And I think maybe it's someone had said I was the commentator. So that was kind of, I guess, the first time when maybe Filipino basketball fans unfortunately got to know Face the commentator. But since then, I wouldn't say that is the beginning of it, because I'd always watched PBA basketball, but that was probably the time when maybe fans got to know who I was, for good or for bad.
I think I've heard people say, I don't know if how true it is, but I think they've said that the Philippines as a nation, the people there, they're the most active on internet and social media. They just on it all the time. So yeah, maybe so you can see how that happens there. So you did mention as well earlier your dad being a former basketball coach. He's won Coach of the Year when it was the British Basketball League and stuff. Could you talk a bit about, I guess, kind of that upbringing or growing up having a coach as a father, and I guess would you say your passion from the game started from there, from your dad?
Yep, because I used to follow him to all his games when he coached the former Thames Valley Tigers. He got fired in 1997. And then he got offered to be an assistant for a bigger team in London called the London Towers. They no longer exist. He was there 2 years. And then the team that fired him previously, they were more local to where we live, which is the same house now. And he was assistant there for another 4 or 5 years while they were training at my high school. So that all came from him. If you came home, we are British. We like soccer, or football as we call it over here. But basketball's always been, it's always just been something that's just natural about ourselves. Everyone, and again, I never say we are basketball experts. We're not gurus. We come from a country that predominantly isn't known for basketball, but it's just something we've always been passionate about.
Okay. And speaking on that passion, how would you just, I guess, overall describe the passion and love you do have for the? I mean, you've said earlier you just describe yourself as a fan, but I guess what does the game mean to you in your life?
I mean, without being too cliche, without being too dramatic or to sensationalize, it's not a case of my heart's not a basketball that beats. It's not a case where it's all my life. My life is obviously my family, but it's just, to be honest, it's just it's what keeps me intact. It's natural for me. It's part of my daily life. In my free time, it's just flip on, see what's happening in the international world. We'll see what's happening in the NBA. I mean, I am passionate about it, no doubt, but to try not to be over emotional about it, it's just what makes me happy, So, and another, going back, I've probably spent the whole entire Christmas break binge watching all the FIBA's YouTube of previous Eurobasket, Asia Cup, Afrobasket finals, because not only because I like it, but also it's just good for me to see things and learn things that may pertain to what I do this summer or in the future.
Yeah, that's true. Question I wanted to ask about I don't know if you saw, but Patty Mills became the first Australian player to play 1,000 NBA games a few days ago in playing for Utah when they won against Orlando. Could you speak a bit about the career he's had in the NBA, but also in FIBA, in international basketball?
Simple words to describe Patty Mills: tough as nails. He's the standard of what any pro basketball player should be. I don't know him personally. I've never met him. I'm very good friends with Rob Beveridge, Australian basketball coach who's coached in the Chinese Basketball Association and also recently worked in Indonesia with Pelita Jaya. And he, speaking of Coach Rob will say the same thing about Paddy Mills, is that he is the kind of player that's any coach's dream, and that's a rightfully deserved accolade. You know, he's an NBA champion. He won it in 2014, but may he continue to deliver his excellence. And like I said, if you're a young player, I think I saw something on social media about him working out the other day. And you look how he just goes around his typical shoot around. It's at such a high intense pace that there's no wonder he's been able to achieve the things he's achieved. So Paddy Mills, tough as nails.
Yep, he definitely is. Okay, last one, I guess, before you go. I guess I got another NBA question. So I'd say like what we're seeing now in the East, like okay, the Celtics defending champs, but Cleveland have had a really insane record so far this year. But for me, I guess in the East, it's the three true contenders are the Celtics, Cleveland, and the Knicks. Whereas in the West, the Thunder have been like the only great standout team, and everyone else has been kind of like there's been more parity with everyone else. How do you see like things shaping out in the West and the East, and who's going to come out of those two conferences?
There's too much pressure on the Celtics to defend, because this is an interesting franchise. Go back almost 11 years ago when they traded off the big three that they had back in 2007, Pierce, Garnett, to Brooklyn to get all those first-round picks, to which they ably got Jaylen Brown. Why am I having brain fog? Jason Tatum as well, yeah. And they were such a young core. In the early days, they were focusing on how to put big players around them. You know, they brought in Kyrie Irving, but the season that was very telling for me about them, where you knew that they were going to be a championship caliber team sooner rather than later, was 2018, where they took the Cavaliers, that LeBron James Cavaliers team, in 7 games, and they were one quarter away from actually going and, probably in my mind, challenging, at least not defeating, but challenging the Golden State Warriors. But the fact is, there was no Kyrie was injured, and Gordon Hayward was also injured. So what you had was a veteran Al Horford around a very young, hungry, exciting team. And I felt that they needed probably 2 or 3 more seasons. And then they obviously had their mix-ups with the Miami Heat. They stumbled along the way. But there was so much focus of who to put around this young team that I think all they needed to realize was, listen, we have the pieces now. They just need a longer time to blossom. Jason Tatum is possibly one of the best players in the NBA today. So now they're at the stage where they've wanted to be for so long. I mean, look, what was it, 2023? They lost in the finals against the Golden State Warriors. They came close again.
22.
Yeah, 22, sorry, yeah. So the fact that they have a championship now to their belt, now it's, for what happened in 2014, 11 years later, they're right where they want to be. So this is a case now where they want to build a dynasty. You know, when was it? They won in 2008. I think the last championship they won before that must have been, 21 years prior to that, 1987, when they were regarded as one of the best.
86, it was 86.
86.
Around that time, yeah.
That's it, because 87 was the Lakers. I remember that stop.
Yeah.
So that 86 team, as Isaiah Thomas would say, was their best team ever. I mean, that's debatable, because 96 Chicago Bulls are in that debate as well. But I would say the Celtics have to win to really mark down this era as a part of a dynasty. Because if you look about it, Cleveland are good, but do they have the playoff minerals to go against the better teams? Because then also you got to throw in teams like the Orlando Magic. The Orlando Magic now are up on the cover. They're a young, hungry team. So the West is always unpredictable. You never know what to get with the West, because they've always been very strong throughout regular seasons. But even when they're not so strong, they still persist in the postseason. So, and I'd say with the NBA, the way the game is played today, with the volume 3-point shooting, it could be anybody's game or anybody's series when it comes to the postseason. But my money would be on the C's.
Yeah, I guess it would be. I feel like from what I've seen so far, the most, maybe the challenger that could take them, give them a real go would be the Thunder, but they're inexperienced in terms of going that far in the playoffs. But yeah, anyway, Josh, thanks for coming on and speaking to me, and coming on for this interview. That was really cool. It was really cool to have you on and speak to you about your
no problem, man. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Have a
Well,
good rest of your day.